Fett, punch in the coordinates to Morak.
Copy that.
Mando and the gang have got to rescue Grogu from the clutches of Moff Gideon, but first, the last side mission in a whole season full of side missions. Spring the ex-Imperial Mayfeld from New Republic custody so he can hack into an Imperial terminal to find Moff Gideon's cruiser. Directed by Rick Famuyiwa, The Mandalorian Chapter 15, The Believer, brings Djarin one step closer to being reunited with his precious little buddy Grogu, but of course along the way we've got tons of connections to Clone Wars, Rogue One, and how the Imperial Remnant will eventually become the First Order, but most importantly, Slave One flies again. And we'll get into all of that in just a second, but first I have to warn you, this transport is cruising straight for spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen this episode of The Mandalorian just quite yet, now would be a great time to disembark until we're done here. Ooh, the sweet, sweet sound of a seismic charge. It brings up fond memories of the good old days, before the Clone Wars. Jango and Boba, father and son, cruising the hyperspace lanes and, failing to disintegrate a Jedi starfighter. But who you do or don't disintegrate doesn't matter. It's really the awesome sound effects you make along the way. Now look, if you're gonna launch an attack on a giant superpowered Imperial cruiser that's got an army of dark troopers at its disposal, this seems like the kind of ship you'd want to use. But of course, we've seen how possessive Boba Fett is of his personal property.
It belongs to me.
Clearly, it's his ship, so if Mando's gonna wind up with Slave One, either Boba Fett has to die or have like a sudden moment of severe generosity. Then again, in the old expanded universe, Boba Fett did also have a Slave 2 and Slave 4, possibly among other ships, so it wouldn't be completely impossible that maybe he's like, wow, Mando, you sure have earned this cool ship, you can have it, I'm gonna go fly away in Slave 2, which by the way, is also really weird and cool looking. A quick recap. We didn't get any big character reveals this time. Instead, Mando's got to rally his friends. Well, scratch that. He's got to rally a bunch of people he barely knows, some of whom kind of hate him, to infiltrate an Imperial facility. We got Cara Dune on board, who brings along ex-Imperial Triggerman Mayfeld, and of course we have the mercenary Fennec Shand serving a life debt to Boba Fett, who is sporting a brand new paint job and his newly reacquired Mandalorian armor. Mayfeld is toiling away, burying garbage in a New Republic prison camp, only to be sprung out by Cara Dune. The gang takes a ride in Slave One to Morak, where the Imperial Remnant is mining Rhydonium, a super explodable starship fuel. Mayfeld is going to help Mando hack an Imperial terminal to track down Moff Gideon. First step, Mando can't exactly waltz in there wearing his shiny Beskar, so it's Tank Trooper Mando time.
Now that right there is worth the price of admission.
So here's the plan. Kill some troopers, take their gear, and use it to infiltrate the facility. It sounds crazy, but actually no, scratch that, it's not crazy. The same thing happens literally all the time in Star Wars.
I've got a bad feeling about it.
Quiet.
What?
Sorry, I digress. Anyway, simple enough plan, except land pirates.
They're trying to blow the Rhydonium.
They are quickly dispensed of with a good old-fashioned big fight scene on top of a fast-moving vehicle, and so Mando and Mayfeld make it to the facility to the applause of many stormtroopers.
In order to access the network, the terminal has to scan your face.
This operation is for lil baby Grogu, so all bets are off, and so is Mando's helmet. Mayfeld goes along with the plan and helps a visibly uncomfortable Din Djarin get through a tense drink with Imperial officer Valen Hess with social graces and table manners that he surely learned on the streets of South Space Boston. Boring conversation anyway. They get the info on Gideon's cruiser, and getting tired of all this sneaking around, Mayfeld and Mando blast their way out thanks to Cara and Fennec covering them from a distance, and Boba Fett swooping in awesomely with Slave One. The whole endeavor ends with Mayfeld landing a well-placed shot with a cycler rifle to blow up the whole facility.
Nice shot.
Moff Gideon, you have something I want.
Now, Mando took the time to cut a promo vowing to lay the smackdown on Moff Gideon, and the episode ends with Gideon watching the holo and probably getting a little irked that Mando has started stealing his material.
You may think you have some idea what you are in possession of, but you do not.
Mando just took out an entire Imperial facility with his small ragtag team, and he's obviously pissed, so mixing it up with an Imperial cruiser full of factory-fresh dark troopers shouldn't be too difficult, so that might just be fear we see on the face of Moff Gideon.
Yep.
Anyway, the big scene in this episode, Mando and Mayfeld having drinks with the Imperial officer, there are some nerdy references that we'll get to in a second, but the important tidbit of the whole exchange is when this officer describes in kind of vague terms how the Imperial Remnant will eventually morph into the First Order.
You see, with the Redonium you've delivered, we can create havoc that's gonna make burning Khan just pale by comparison.
Smash cut to like 25 years in the future, and now, it's highly unlikely that Hess has any idea of Planet Ilum being transformed into Starkiller Base, but what he talks about here clearly fits into the First Order's whole deal when they show up much later. Cause so much havoc that the galaxy will have no choice but to submit to the First Order's rule in a lawless and dangerous galaxy. Anyway, speaking of all that, Mayfeld is a free man now thanks to all of his hard work this episode, so we wouldn't be surprised if he popped up in Rangers of the New Republic, one of the many new Star Wars projects that Lucasfilm just announced this week, which means that we have no shortage of material to cover on this particular show, but more importantly, it means new Star Wars to look forward to, which is great.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
Because the best parts of Star Wars is all the weird stuff hanging out in the background, here are some Easter eggs and references that we noticed in this episode. One of the aliens in the junkyard scenes is of the Hask species, who made their first appearance in triplet form in Maz Kanata's castle in The Force Awakens, but were likely inspired by some of Ralph McQuarrie's earliest concept art for Cantina aliens in A New Hope. You can never have too many space werewolves, that's for sure. This is the first time we've seen shore troopers and tank troopers in live-action form since Rogue One. Mando and Mayfeld's shaky Rhydonium delivery pays homage to the 1953 classic The Wages of Fear and William Friedkin's 1977 remake Sorcerer, which was released just a month after A New Hope, and because it had this crazy new thing called Star Wars to compete with, it infamously bombed at the box office. Mayfeld saves Din Djarin's bacon when he says he lost his hearing on Tanab, most likely referring to the Battle of Tanab, which is where Lando served the Rebel Alliance with distinction, earning him the rank of general.
You're the respectable one, remember?
Mayfeld also name drops Operation Cinder, which we know from Battlefront 2, and Burnin' Khan, one of the planets targeted by it. Imperial Officer Hess is portrayed by actor Richard Brake. If he looks familiar, that's because he's previously appeared in some other ice-cold roles, including the frickin' Night King and Joe Chill, the dude who killed Batman's parents. Hopefully he doesn't get typecast as a guy who only gets killed at point-blank range.
Hey Joe, Falcone says hi.
And when Mayfeld says they're gonna go fill out some TPS reports, just remember to include your cover sheets. There was a memo about it.
If you could just go ahead and make sure you do that from now on, that would be great. And I'll go ahead and make sure you get another copy of that memo. Okay?
Yeah, no, I have the memo. I've got it.
Anyway, it's Friday, so we're gonna try to sneak out a few minutes early before our commanding officers ask us to report for weekend duty. But what did you think about this week's episode? Are we gonna see a Jedi show up in the season finale? What do you make of Boba Fett's new paint job? I hate it. Let's talk about it in the comments. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode of Canon Fodder. If you want to see more Star Wars, go check out why we think Ahsoka Tano is tracking down Grand Admiral Thrawn, and be sure to follow IGN wherever you like to watch. And as always, may the Force be with you. This is the way. No disintegrations. Star Wars reference. We'll see you next week.